everyone. My name is Saket Kumar Singh and I am working as an assistant professor in Department of Computer Science Engineering, Ajay Kumar Garg Engineering College, Ghaziabad. So, today in this lecture we are going to see what do we call as file system interface. What is a file system interface? Okay. So, for that we must understand what is a file, where it is stored in the system. Okay. So, let us continue with the outline of this lecture. So, the lecture will goes in a manner like, first we will see with the concept of file, what is a file, okay, and then we will see what are those access methods, used for file systems, okay, and then we will see what is disk and directory structure, and then we will see file sharing, how a file is shared, either you are using a Windows operating system or a Unix operating system. So, how your file is how you can share your files among different users or different PCs. Okay. So, last we will see that how we can protect our file from an unauthorized access, so that an unauthorized person cannot have access to the secured files. Okay. And then, so let us start the file concept. So, I hope you all are aware of what is a file. A file is a record, it is a named collection of related information. It is a named collection of related information. File represents both data and program. Okay. So, it is not simply only a data, it is a combination of program and data. A data can be of numeric, okay, a character or a binary. So, a data can take any of these forms, like a data can be numeric data or character data or binary data, okay, and the program. So, can be a this can be a sequence of bits, bytes, lines and records. Okay. So, a file can be a sequence of bits, bytes, lines and records. Okay. Contents defined by files creator. Contents, whatever the content of the file, that is defined by the creator of the file. Like if I am creating a file, then I will decide what is the content that I have to put inside that file. Okay. Different structures of file based on their types, such as text file, source file and executable files. Okay. So, these are some of the types of files, like we generally deal with, like even when you are typing something, we use .txt or .doc, okay, or the source file whenever you are writing some programming language or some program codes, that is your source file. Some of the object file, libraries file like DLLs, and executable files like .exe in Windows. Okay. That will be different when you talk about different operating system. Okay. So, different file types are, first is your text file types. I hope you all are aware of what is a text file type. A text is a sequence of characters organized in lines. Source file, it is a sequence of subroutines and functions, each of which is further organized. Okay. So, source file, it is a sequence of subroutines. So, whatever you write, like whenever you write a C program, you just save it as with an extension of .c, or whenever you write a Java program, you save it as a extension of .java. So, all those are the sequence of subroutines and functions, each of which is further organized as declarations followed by the executable statements. Okay. Object files are sequence of bytes organized into blocks understandable by the system linker. Okay. And the next is your executable file. What are the executable files? A series of code sections that the loader can bring into memory and execute. Okay. So, when you have written a program, when you have written a source file, then you have to compile it. The compiler, what the compiler do? Compiler creates an executable file that you can execute okay, in your system. So, for executing a program, you know that it must be loaded into memory and then executed inside the CPU. Okay. So, different attributes of file, or you can say the information of files, information related to files, the first thing is your file name. Okay, so this is the only information that kept in human readable or human understandable form, because the file name is generally given by the file creator. Okay, and then identifier, which is a unique tag or unique number, identifies file system, identifies file within a file system. Okay, the type of file is another file attribute which holds the which needed for systems that support different types. Okay, and then location is pointer to file location on device, like if you have kept your file in on some location in your hard disk or secondary disk, so there should be a pointer to that location, otherwise your file would not be accessible. Okay, size of the file, current file size. Okay, and then there are many other attributes like protections and time, date and user identification. So these are some of the important attributes of file. You might, if you want to check, if you want to see these attributes, you can go and check by clicking right clicking on any of the file. You can check the properties, you can check the attributes of the file. Okay, so information about files are kept in the directory structure. So all these information about these files, any file, let's talk about a video file or an audio file. So any file that you are dealing with, the information about that file is stored inside the directory. Okay, so we will see directory in our next slides. Now many variations including extended file attributes such as file checksum. Okay, so checksum are used to detect whether the file has been modified or not. Okay, and then information kept in the directory structure. So we will see when we'll look on the directory structure. File operations, what are the file operations involved? So let's again I want to define the file. It is an abstract data type. Okay, so create, these are the some of the operations you are already doing, these you are already performing these operations from your school days, like creating a file, space must find in the space must be find in the file system. For creating a file, there should be a space where you want to create a file. If no space is available, you cannot create a file. Okay, and then all entry for new file must be made in the directory. Whenever you are creating a new file, like if you are using a Unix operating system, there if you want to create a new file, first you have to go inside the directory, then look for the space, and then you can create a new file. Okay, so other operation is writing a file. So we all know what is writing a file. It is a file, a system call specifying file name and the information to be written on file is generated. Whenever you want to write a file, there must be a system call which will be generated in the background, which specify the file name and the information to be written on file. Okay, so system searches the directory for the file name first. If you want to write a file, if you want to if you want to write on a particular file, system must search that file name inside the file directory. Okay, information is written at the right pointer location. So there is a pointer which is locating to the location where the file is kept. So that the file in which you want to write, there must be a right pointer which is locating that file. Okay, another important operation is reading a file. If you want to read a file, again a system call will be generated which specify the file name and the next block of file where you want to read. Okay, and again directory must be searched, because without searching the directory you cannot find out the location of the file, or you cannot find whether the file is existing inside the directory or not. Some other types of operations like repositioning within a file. So if you want to reposition, again directory search for associated entry, and current file position pointer is repositioned to a given value. Like if you want to keep one file from one position to another, then you must modify the position pointer. Okay, this file operation is also known as seek. Okay. Now the next is your deleting a file. We always used to delete some files which we have used, you can delete some of the unused files, okay, like temporary files or any that are automatically created. We generally delete the temporary files. Okay. So deleting a file, what happens, the first task is same, directory search for the associated entry should be the specified file name and the pointer. System releases all file space so that it can be used by the other files. Okay. Truncating a file means what? Truncating a file means erase the content of file but keep its attribute. Erase the content of file but keep its attribute. You want to erase the content of the file, but you want to leave the file as it is, like suppose you have written some text document, okay, and the use of that text document has, but you have kept that text document for like copying something which you are, suppose you want to write a phone number on a call, so you are using a text document, okay. But after that, when you have saved that number in your mobile phone, you don't want to delete the whole text file, you just want to delete the number. So in that case, this is the case of truncating a file, means erasing the content of the file, but you are keeping the attribute, file attribute. Okay. So what are these open files? Whenever a file are open, these are the things that are maintained. First is your open file table, which keeps track of open files. Next is your file pointer. Okay, so file pointer to the last read and write location per process that has the file open. Okay, it keeps the pointer of the last read and last write operations whenever the memory has accessed. File open count, how many number of files are open right now at a particular time, that this can be tracked from this file open count table. And disk location of the file, so where the file is stored on the hard disk, that you can find out from disk location of the file. Cache of data access information, okay, this is, you can say, a cache of data access information. Access rights, per process access mode information, like access rights, like if for every file there must be an access right, so whomsoever can access that file. Okay. So what are file locking? Okay, these file locking is provided by some operating system and file system. Not all the operating system supports this, but these are supported by some of the operating system where you can lock your file. Okay, so the locks are similar to the reader writer locks that you have already studied in your process synchronization. Shared lock, similar to reader lock. Okay, several processes can acquire concurrently. And exclusive locks similar to the writer lock. Okay, and then mediates access to a file in either it is a mandatory or advisory. Mandatory means access is denied depending on locks held and requested. Okay, access is denied. Advisory is processes can find the status of locks and decide what to do. Okay, so in advisory you are giving some hint to how to open the lock, and in mandatory the access will be denied even if you are having some information or having some authority. Okay, so depending on the locks held and requested. So this is very important, what are several access methods techniques? What are several access methods? Okay, so first is your sequential access. Okay, sequential access. What does this sequential access? Information in the file is processed in order, one record after another. Of course, if you are talking about sequential, or you can say it as linear. Okay, so what does this mean? It is information in the file is processed in order. So whenever you want to access the file, you are going to access it in order, means the order in which it is stored, you will access it like in order, like 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. You cannot directly jump from 1, you cannot directly jump from 1 to 7. Okay, file location. So, this is a small code snippet like read next, write next, reset, no read after last write, and rewrite. Now, the another method is your direct access. Direct access, or this is also known as relative access. In this, file is fixed length logical records which allows program to read write records rapidly in no particular order. No particular order is required in this. Okay. So, we may read block 53 after block 14. Okay. Let us see a small code snippet, read and write n position to n, okay, and then read next, write next, rewrite, and where n is your relative block number, n is your relative block number. Okay. So, relative block number is what? Relative block number is index relative to the beginning of file, which allow OS to decide where file should be placed. Okay. Other access methods are these methods can build on some of the top of the base methods. Okay. It generally involves creation of an index which contains pointers to the various blocks for the file. Okay. So, this is generally the index method that we use in our books, or the index method that we use in our files. Okay. Or even in our lab files we used to create the index that this particular experiment or this particular program is residing on which page. Similarly, this index method can also be used for accessing the files. Okay. To find the record, we first search the index and then use the pointer. Okay. So, for large files, index for the index file can be used. Suppose you are dealing with a very large file, then you can create this index multi-level. Like first you will create the index for the index, and this index will contain the pointer to the specific file location. Okay. So, primary index files would contain pointers to the secondary index files, which would point to the actual data. So, for example, IBM index sequential access method is a type. A small master index points to disk block of secondary index. So, there is multiple index used in this IBM index sequential access methods. Okay. So, this is an diagram showing that in index allocation. Here you can see these are the index which, and this is containing the pointer to this file location. Okay. So, now we are going to see some of the directory and disk structures. What are these? Disk can be subdivided into partitions. I hope you all are knowing this. What is partitions? Whenever you used to format your the hard disk or the secondary memory, whenever you want to format, whenever you want to install a new operating system, then disk can be subdivided. We generally use this partition scheme to partition our volume. So, we will see what are the difference between partitions and volumes. Okay. Disk or partitions can be RAID protected. We have already seen what is RAID, redundant array of independent disk. So, RAID protected against failure. So, whenever if suppose we are worried about that the file will be lost, so we can apply RAID concept to protect it against the failure. Disk or partition can be used unformatted, like suppose when if your disk is not being partitioned, there are some unpartitioned spaces left. So, that is your unformatted or raw space. You might have seen somewhere when if you will not select the proper partitioning volume size, then some of your memory will be unformatted or raw, that you cannot use without a file system or formatted with a file system. So, generally whenever we are using this is a Windows system. Okay. If you are using a Unix system, if you are using a Linux system, that must be formatted with a particular file system. Okay. Partitions, also known as mini disks or slices, entity containing file system known as volume. So like if I am keeping the windows in my C drive, so that C drive, E drive, F drive, D drive, so whatever the partition I am applying, all those are considered to be the volume. Okay. A device directory records information such as name, location, size, type for all the files in the volume. So device directory very much important. Different types of directory structure, here we will see what are the different types of directory structure. First is your single level directory. All files are contained in the same directory. So this will be clear when we will see the diagram. So here you can see these all the files are kept in a same directory. So there are some problems associated with this single directory structure. What? Because you are keeping all the files inside the same directory, that means there may be a clashing of the file names. Like suppose if there are multiple users who are using the same directory, and all the users are using that same directory for creating new files. So it might be possible, like suppose that I have shared one of the folders, I have shared one of the files where all students have to submit their assignment. So it might be possible that 20 students have named their file as test, and 10 students have named their file as assign or assignment 1. Okay, so that is very difficult for using this directory structure. If all those students will simultaneously try to copy their assignment in the same folder, they will not be able to do that. Why? Because the file names will be clashing. Another thing that is the disadvantage is, first is this suffers from naming confusion. Second is number of files is more, which is difficult to handle by a single user. Okay, number of files will be very large, as because multiple users are using the same directory. So the next directory level is your two level directory. This is separate, each and every user are using the separate directory. Okay. So you can see this is your figure. User number 1 are having this directory, user 2 is having this directory, user 3 is having this directory, user 4 is having this directory. Okay. So can have the same file name or different for different users. So different users can keep the same named files in different directories. Okay, efficient searching, because this will behave like an indexed. Okay, and other directory structure is this graph structure, acyclic graph directory structure. Here you can see no cycle should be there. So this is your this is your tree structure directory. So this is your tree structure directory, and this allows users to create their own subdirectories. Means if even this is your main directory, and this is allowing the users to create their own subdirectory. So you can see this is your subdirectory, this is your subdirectory, this is your subdirectory. So this is a tree structure, tree directory structure. This prohibits sharing of files and directory, because suppose that two programmers are working on the same project and they want to share their directory, but this tree prohibits sharing of files and directories. Okay, so to help this, another way which came was acyclic graph directory. So this is your acyclic graph directory. Here you can see some of the directories or some of the files can be shared in this acyclic graph directories. This allows sharing of files and directories. Okay, and this allows sharing of files and directories. Now the next one is general graph directory structure. General graph directory structure, in this there must be a cycle detection algorithm running all the time to detect whether a cycle is formed. Whenever you will try to add a new link, okay, so there must be an algorithm. You can see the disadvantages of this general graph directory structure. Every time a new link is added, a cycle detection algorithm which is computationally very expensive is used to detect the cycle. Okay, garbage collection is another way to detect the cycle, okay, but it is extremely time consuming and is thus seldom attempted. Okay, so this graph, general graph directory structure is not probably used in this is used in very less operating system because due to its limitations. So now we are talking about different file sharing methods. So let's see some of the like sharing of files on multi-user systems is desirable, of course, because if you are using a multi-user system in which suppose I am using the same system with my username like Saket, and I want to share the system with my brother, okay, so there must be a multiple user, so the file sharing should be there. Okay, so sharing may be done through a protection scheme. On distributed system, files may be shared across a network. Network file system is a common distributed file sharing method. Okay, so you might have shared some of the files on the network, whatever it is, a local area network, or if you want to share it on the internet, there are various ways you can share the documents on the internet, but if you want to share it on the local area network, it will be clear when you will see some of the figures in the next slides. Okay, so if multi-user system, there are owners who can change attributes and grant access and have most common controls over the file. Another is your groups, a subset of user who can share access to the file. User IDs, which are the identities which identifies users, allowing permissions and protections to be per user, and group ID allows users to be in groups, permitting group access rights. Okay, so these are some of the protocols like FTP was used, LDAP, DNS, NIS. Okay, now what is protection? A file owner creator should be able to control what can be done by whom, types of access, read, write, execute, append, delete, list. So all these should be protected, like so that an unauthorized user cannot access these kind of cannot perform these kind of operation on a protected file. Okay, so this is a Windows 7 access control management. Here you can see you can share some of the rights, like if you want to give full control, allow or deny, if you want to give modify control, if you want to give read execute control. So this is a Windows 7 diagram. You can see if you want to give the guest user what are the rights that you want to give. Okay, so that's all for this lecture. We will again meet with different file system interface in our next lecture. Thank you.